The Deer Farming Channel is brought to you by Rafter P Construction. Stick around to learn more about Rafter P's design build process and, of course, the biggest deer in the world. Today's show is all about chronic wasting disease and how it's being handled, and the future is bright. The white-tailed deer is America's favorite big game animal, and white-tailed deer farming is the fastest growing segment in the agriculture industry. Our program's mission is to dive into the world of deer farming and inform you of how deer farmers all over the country are now using rapidly developing science-based research on their captive deer herds to solve the chronic wasting disease issue through selective breeding. Not only is this new science working, but it's obvious that captive deer breeding is the only way to help save America's deer herds from CWD, which will help improve overall herd health and at the same time can produce more quality trophy-sized animals for the general public. Join me as we discover how whitetail genetics, deer auctions, animal husbandry, and so much more drive the modern-day deer farming industry. My name is Keith Warren, and this is Deer and Wildlife Stories. Since the 1960s, there's been a disease that's impacted deer and elk populations as well as deer and elk hunters around the country, and the disease is called chronic wasting disease. And it's now spread in 31 states and 4 Canadian provinces, and that disease is managed differently depending upon where it's located. Some states handle it different than others, just like in some states they handle COVID different than other states. Today's program is all about the blue sky that we have in front of us. We're going to tell you about some new research that is just shaping the deer breeding industry, and it brought a bright light to the future for all deer and elk lovers. This episode is brought to you by the team at Union Hill Whitetails. They're an operation located just outside of Copperell, Texas, and are home to some of the best trophy whitetail in the state, along with axes, fallow, and black buck. The manager of Union Hill is my friend Jodi Phillips. She's made a name for herself by growing some of the biggest and prettiest bucks in the industry. She's also a wealth of knowledge when it comes to animal husbandry. In addition to managing Union Hill, Jodi runs her own farm called P-Bar Whitetails. Today she'll be sharing insights on how she's tackling CWD head-on. We'll be diving into her management practices and getting the lowdown on her cutting-edge breeding strategy.
So I'm Jodi Phillips. I am the owner of P-Bar Whitetails, and I am the manager of Union Hill Whitetails and a few other release sites in Texas. When we first got in the deer business, the traits that we looked for were basically antler driven to see who could go the biggest, prettiest buck. I think a lot of traits were left behind in that quest. Fertility, durability, among other things. Now we've changed to where durability has become one of the main traits. Now we're trying to grow big deer that are hardy and durable and have good CWD scores. So this past year we pivoted into a different breeding strategy. We went out and found the best SS markered buck that we could find. His name is Champion. He was the one that we felt checked all the boxes. He had the look that we wanted, GEBV scores were what we wanted, and he is a SS marked buck. I bred him at all of the farms that we manage. He has moved the needle substantially in 1 year in our fawn crop. Those breeding specifically for CWD traits has definitely transformed our fawn crop from what we would have had years ago into what we have standing on the ground today. So our fawns out of Champion we're really excited about. Being an SS, we bred him to a lot of our GG does that we knew we had to change those genetics. So those does breeding to an SS, we got GSs. And on some does that had GS codons already, we got a lot of SSs out of. And he's moved our GEBV scores further into the negative than I ever thought he would. So I'm super proud to be the president of Texas Deer Association, elected by my peers and colleagues, so it's a very big honor for me. My goal as the TDA president is to help breed toward the solution and help other people do the same so that we can all work together in unity as an industry to solve CWD, to solve any problems that we have, and maybe eventually be able to insert resistant deer into the wild. That would be my dream.
So as with any new science, there are skeptics, and I gotta admit, I was skeptical. There were a lot of people that were skeptical, but now after this breeding program has been established and been ongoing now for several years, it is proven that it's working. Deer and Wildlife Stories is brought to you by MVP Whitetails, Dr. Ray Favero's Whitetail Genetics, UVC Power Sports Tractors and Outdoors, and Rafter P Construction. For more videos on deer farming, check out the Deer Farming channel on YouTube and Facebook. One of the things you'll notice when you come is that everything is impeccable. Everything is in perfect order. From the feed troughs to the deer pens, I mean, they're manicured beautifully. You're not gonna see anything that's out of order. Even take a look at the water troughs. The water's clean enough that you drink out of it. It's really important for Jodi and for deer farmers to keep their facilities clean because it's all about biosecurity.
So here, for biosecurity purposes, we bleach everything. Everything here is very, very clean. I demand a clean facility. If we're not working in a clean environment, I don't feel like our deer can be healthy. The overall health of our deer is really good. Management practices, the correct feed practices, clean water, clean pens, and all those things, I think, help with that. We don't have a lot of sickness here, I think, because we try to minimize the spread of disease as much as we possibly can. When we do our testing here, we follow the protocols suggested to us by our vet. We don't go from farm to farm in the same shoes or clothes. If we have someone visiting our farm, we ask that we are able to sterilize their shoes, or they have to wear booties over their shoes. Just anything, any precautionary move that we can take to stop the spread of disease, we try to take. So we couldn't do what we do without everyone who works with us, from the crew at Union Hill to the crew at P-Bar and everyone else in between. I'd always tell them, anyone that they talk to, please tell them what we do. Tell them what our management practices are, so that maybe they'll do the same and start a biosecurity program at their own farm. Paired with the correct breeding, I feel like the sky's the limit.
So in the past, Jodi has bottle raised a lot of deer, okay? And the reason why is to keep them gentle. Well, she's not doing that anymore. And it saves a lot of manpower from bottle raising the deer.
So it's super important for us to have gentle deer here. For years we bottle raised everything, but now that everything here is super chill, we don't have to do that anymore. We've pivoted our program into where our does are raising our fawns, which in turn makes them healthier over time. And because the moms are calm, the fawns are calm. And it allows us to spend more time in the pens, treating and feeding and getting them used to us as fawns on their moms. And so the whole farm is, for the most part, pretty chill.
Now keep in mind that the fawns that are on the ground, they are better genetics than their mothers, for sure. And the reason why is because they've been scientifically bred with this new breeding program in mind. So the future is bright. But when these fawns have fawns, those fawns are going to even be better. And the good thing about dealing with the deer here is the pedigrees. Not only are the breeding values going to be good and the codons are going to be right, but the pedigrees are going to be there too. Deer and Wildlife Stories is brought to you by Big Time Whitetails and Exotics, LE Fence, the Texas Deer Association, UVC Power Sports Tractors and Outdoors, and New Dart. Deer and Wildlife Stories will be right back. Closed captioning is brought to you by Advanced Deer Genetics.
So we've invited Chris Seabury out to the farm today to discuss CWD. He is the leading researcher in CWD, and Keith was able to sit down with him and ask him some questions that I'm sure everybody's really wanting to know.
This is Dr. Christopher Seabury, and he is the leading researcher for chronic wasting disease in the world, in my opinion. I mean, you have done more for the deer breeding industry than any human being on earth. He was able to identify something genetically in these deer that it changed what's going on in deer breeding facilities all over the country. So tell them about what you found out, what you discovered.
We determined that the heritability of differences in susceptibility to CWD is high, and that means that they will respond favorably, the deer, to a structured genetic selection breeding program, very similar to what we do in the scrapie eradication program. In fact, the genetics work similarly to what works in sheep. It just takes more genetic elements in white-tailed deer to be selecting on for breeding. And so we're not manipulating the genetics at all. We went out, we found and determined the best of what Mother Nature has provided, and we're simply screening the deer to identify those deer that have the very best genetics and then selectively breeding those deer to make them less susceptible and more durable against CWD.
Now, what I want to point out that this cannot be done in the wild. There's no way it can be done in the wild. And so what is happening is that the only way that CWD is going to get beat, the only way, is through captive deer breeding programs. And in some cases, states are even looking at taking deer from deer breeding programs and restocking them into the wild, all because of this research. So explain to them about, first off, the codons and what we're really looking for.
So really there's a two-part breeder's recipe, and the reason that we know that is because we first found all the natural genetic variation that exists on all the chromosomes, which we call alleles, including the codons in the prion gene. And when we tested all of those genetic features at the same time, we found that codon 96, the G and S allele, the S has the strongest protective effect of any single feature, and the G has the strongest effects towards susceptibility. There are many, many other alleles on the chromosomes, though, that cumulatively have effects on increasing resistance or durability or increasing susceptibility. So what we do is, once we have reference data and we can quantify that, we can actually take a genetic profile of a deer like one here, and we can simply sum those up mathematically, and that produces an estimate of the deer's genetic merit. Those estimates can either be positive numbers, which would indicate that they are moderately to highly susceptible, or they can be negative numbers. And the more negative they become, the more durability the deer has. And so the two-part breeder's recipe is lose the G's at codon 96 while making the breeding values more and more negative. People always ask me, which one is more important, the codon 96 or the breeding value? And the answer is, they're both important. The best approach is to accomplish both things at the same time in your breeding program. And then you will put on the full armor of protection.
So if you're a deer breeder and you want to start breeding this method, you're going to have to use artificial insemination. You're going to have to make the decision to do that. It's just simple as that. And to get started, the first thing you need to do is find out what you have. So you're going to need to take a tissue sample and send it off to NADAR to have them score it, to tell you what you've got. Once you have what you have, and you know where you need to go get rid of the G's, and you need to drop the breeding value as low as you can get it. Then you can start taking a look at semen that's available around the country, and more people are starting to advertise semen off these bucks they're pretty doggone good bucks. I mean, they're SS, they have good breeding values, and so you're going to need to be able to purchase the right semen, whatever you can afford, whatever works with your budget, and put it in those does. And it's the offspring that what you're looking at, that you're going to look at that score and go, I'm moving in the right direction. There's a lot of good things that are coming up that we're finding from making these breeding decisions and lower the breeding values and getting more SS's in your herd that we can talk about here in a little bit. A lot more benefits other than just making them more durable to CWD. There was a lot of good information that was given, and it may be over people's heads. So head to the Deer Farming Channel, watch it over and over again. Deer and Wildlife Stories is brought to you by Record Rack Deer and Elk Feeds, the North American Deer Registry, New Dart,
CC Bar Whitetails,
and the North American Deer Farmers Association. Now for some great information on fencing from our friends at LE Fence.
Hey guys, it's Ron here with LE Fence again. Kind of showing you a unique project that we did. Sometimes you get certain types of animals that are athletic game, ibex, different types of sheep that are really good at jumping corners, getting out of your enclosures or your breeding bins. You know, as soon as they do that, you're never going to see them again, especially if you're in a rocky terrain with a lot of mountains like we are right now. So right here we've got some breeding pens, and what we did is we put some corner toppers over top of our deer pens to keep the animals from jumping out. So basically what you do on this is just wherever your corner is, at a 45-degree angle, you just take into a top rail a 2-inch square tubing, cut across, just make a triangle with it, and then on top, go ahead and just weld some 4-inch cattle panel to the top. So here at LE Fence, adding your corner toppers is our #1 solution at trying to keep animals from getting out of your enclosures as long as they know how to jump more than 8 feet. If you have any questions, just give me a call. Have a good day.
With CWD popping up in all these new states are trying to figure out how are they handling it. And so Dr. Seabury has actually, he's been overseeing a project called the Ox Ranch Project. It's unbelievable what's been going on over there. And we had an opportunity, we made a video on that. The ox purchased a deer, brought it in, and it turned out that that deer was positive. They didn't know about it for 2 years. And when the deer turned up positive, they immediately went in and took that deer out, removed that deer, and then they removed all the other deer that were with it. They removed the fawns that were sired by that deer, and then they tested everybody else, okay? And what is amazing is that they didn't have any other positives. None of the fawns were positive. None of the does that were exposed to that buck were positive. None of the bucks that were exposed to that buck were positive. And why would that be? Explain why that.
You know, that deer was positive upon arrival. I mean, it came from a positive pen where they purchased it from. And it just happened to be put in with deer that were some of their most durable deer, both in a buck pen during the off season and the does that it was with in the breeding pen during the breeding season. All of those deer represented some of their most durable deer. So when I told them that I wanted to remove them, it was kind of a hard pill to swallow. But they did that, and I'm convinced that that plus the genetic composition of those deer is what has prevented them from having an escalating problem over time.
They have tested their deer for several years now, every year, sometimes twice a year.
Right.
And they have selectively bred, and they are now starting to release deer. And the Ox Ranch was a positive CWD facility. And how many hundreds have been tested?
I think that we're close to maybe 3,000 tests over there.
And so as these bucks that they're releasing are coming out of the trailer, it's a very rewarding feeling for you, isn't it?
It is, and one reason that it's even more rewarding is that when I talked to Ox, in fact, they called me and they said, you know, we also noticed something that you told us might be true and we want to tell you. And I said, well, what is that? And they said, we noticed that when we culled the deer that you told us to cull, our adult mortality rate went down by a lot. Like, we only have about a third of the adult mortality rate in a given month that we used to have, or less. And they said our fawns, they seem to have higher livability.
I know that as I travel around the country doing the deer and wildlife story shows, whether I'm in Pennsylvania or Kentucky, the people that are using the Seabury method as far as breeding goes, they're experiencing the same thing. So we're making deer more durable to the CWD disease for sure. But the thing about it is our deer are becoming more healthy at the same time. It's obvious. And so what's cool about the deer breeding world, you go to a convention and we're all kind of competitors, but we're all in the same family, okay? And we need to help one another. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to help one another build healthier, more durable deer. And this program certainly does that, but there's going to be more benefit than just building deer that are durable to CWD. It's building a healthier deer herd, period.
I think that enhanced durability to CWD is correlated with enhanced durability probably to other things as well. and enhance livability. So it's not probably causal, but they're correlated traits, and that's why we see it. But I should also point out that when I did that blind validation, that was a one-time assessment, and I couldn't take any further steps. I had to make a prediction about what deer I thought would be CWD positive at positive facilities blindly, based only on their genetics and the breeding values, and I only use the breeding values to do that. But when it comes to breeding deer, once I know that the S allele is the strongest effect on protection if you test each allele individually, then I want to have that two-part recipe where I get rid of the G's and make the breeding values more and more negative.
And so as you can see, all this information we've given you is the reason why the deer industry is a great place to be right now. There's a lot of good optimism out there based upon this science. People are producing thousands and thousands of deer now that are genetically durable to CWD. And so it couldn't happen without the science and the research that Dr. Seabury's done. And it couldn't happen without the cooperation from deer farmers all over the country, because deer farms are going to be the answer to this disease, thanks to the science that you've come up with. Hope this video has helped open your eyes to how bright the future is for deer farming and for deer enthusiasts all over the country. As I said earlier, you can go to the Deer Farming channel and watch this over and over again, and we encourage you to do that to learn more about deer breeding and making the right selections when it comes to deer breeding. And like I say a lot in my Facebook posts, long live the deer breeder.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for watching.
For more videos on deer farming, check out the Deer Farming channel on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, so you've got property and you're wanting to build. Maybe a barn dominium, maybe deer facilities, or maybe a badass lodge. Well, you've got to check out Rafter P Construction. Rafter P Construction is the leading design-build contractor across the state of Texas. Specializing in quality farm and ranch design-build projects, Rafter P Construction encourages their customers to be very hands-on, incorporating your input into every aspect of your project with their in-house design teams. The goal of Rafter P Construction is to be your builder for life. Rafter P Construction, they'll be with you every step of the way to build your dream project, all the while keeping quality and customer satisfaction at the forefront.